The nurse forgot to knock again, and this time I didn't bother pretending I was asleep. The hallway lights at Birchridge Care dimmed at night, but never fully. They left a low glow that stretched under every door, just enough to remind you you weren't home. That this wasn't your bed. That someone could wheel you out in your sleep and you'd have no say. A buzzing overhead speaker whispered a name that wasn't mine, and I lay there, hands folded across my stomach like a patient waiting for a priest. "Mr. Halpern, time for your meds." She said it as if we were on a schedule together, as if I'd asked to be placed in a corner room with fading yellow paint and a cracked view of the parking lot. I turned my face to the wall, let her walk around me. I used to command attention when I entered a room. Postmaster of Hallisburg for 27 years, an office that still has my photograph above the desk. My signature stamped on 1,000 payslips, tax forms, veterans' letters. People used to stand when I arrived. Now they whispered when I shuffled past, barefoot in these damn grippy socks. I made her wait until the silence grew awkward. Then I took the pills dry. "My son hasn't visited in 6 months. He sent a basket of grapefruit in January with a printed card, no handwriting, just block letters. 'Stay strong, Dad.' It went straight into the trash. My daughter-in-law, Marcy, was the last one to stand in this room. She didn't sit, didn't offer her usual poison pleasantries. Just dropped a folder on the dresser and said, 'Everything's been arranged.' Her tone was cool, her perfume medicinal, arranged. Like I was a meal plan or an entertainment package. I asked her then, 'Whose idea was it?' But she only said, 'It's for your safety.' She never answered questions she found inconvenient. I looked at the folder after she left. Not right away. First, I stared at the door for a long time, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard her say sold. The house. My house. Where Elise planted tulips in the shape of a crescent moon every spring. Where the oak still wore the tire swing, though no child had sat on it in years. I couldn't imagine it empty. I couldn't picture strangers in our kitchen arguing over countertops. But the folder said otherwise. Appraisal reports, transaction paperwork, a closing date. It was done. Done without me. And the worst part wasn't that they'd done it. The worst part was how quietly they'd done it, like they were disposing of something no longer useful. My stomach turned even as the pills started to settle. I closed my eyes, not because I was tired, but because I needed darkness to hide the heat rising in my throat. Elise would have never let this happen. She would have fought them, calmly but fiercely. Her voice was never sharp, just precise. Even when she was dying, she made decisions with clarity. When the doctor told us the cancer had spread, she nodded once, turned to me and said, "Then let's get everything in order." But we hadn't, not all of it. I remember asking her if she wanted to change the policy, our life insurance, our estate details, after her diagnosis. She shook her head. "They'll do what they want anyway," she said. "But let them do it after I'm gone. I don't want to watch." I never understood that phrase until this moment. The watching is the cruelest part, the silence, the unspoken verdict, that your life, your decisions, no longer belong to you. Outside, a car door slammed, then another. Laughter muffled through the mud glass, a family visiting someone else, maybe in room 2B where the woman with the quilts never remembers her own name but still sings gospel at 5 a.m. I stood, walked to the window slowly, careful of the pain in my hip. The parking lot shimmered under the security lights. I watched until the figures disappeared behind the glass doors. Then I whispered, "You're not taking this without a fight." I repeated the words the next morning while brushing my teeth over the sink in the shared bathroom. The mirror was too small, chipped on the lower left corner. My face looked uneven in it, distorted like a funhouse reflection, one side older than the other. I didn't recognize myself completely. The lines had deepened, especially around the mouth. There was always a slight downward pull now, as though gravity had finally claimed its victory. A nurse passed behind me. Didn't say anything. I must have looked like I was muttering to myself. Maybe I was. But it didn't matter. Something had shifted. That sentence had weight now, mass behind it. I'd spoken it not out of defiance, but recognition. I was still in there, beneath the folded sweaters and the evening meds and the calls that never came. After breakfast, I asked about using the phone. The young orderly, Kyle, looked up from his clipboard and said, "The communal one's available after 10 for local calls only." That wasn't what I needed. I meant my phone, my cell. He blinked. "I thought you didn't bring one." I hadn't. Marcy had insisted they'd handle everything, told me not to worry. Less clutter, she'd said, less stress. I let her talk. I let too much slide that week. I nodded at Kyle. "Can you check if it's in my drawer? Top left." He hesitated, then wheeled my cart back to the room and rummaged. "No phone, Mr. Halpern. Sorry." But I wasn't sorry anymore. I was beginning to feel something else, the sharp edge of memory. The week before they brought me here, I'd been recovering from bronchitis. Nothing major. Just enough to make Marcy nervous. She started coming by with casseroles again like she used to after Elise passed. But there was a difference. Her questions weren't about how I was feeling. They were about how often I was eating, how long I could go without assistance. Then my son showed up, and they started whispering in the kitchen. They paused when I walked in. That's when I knew. Elise had warned me once, years ago. They don't take things all at once, just slowly enough that you don't notice. Back then I thought she was being cynical. Now I understood. When Kyle left, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the beige wallpaper, a pattern so faint it almost looked like a stain. They'd sold the house while I was still alive. That fact wrapped around my chest like a tightening belt. I thought of Elise's jewelry box. It had a false bottom, where she kept old letters, newspaper clippings, and a tiny bundle of cash for emergencies. I wondered if it was still there, or if Marcy had gotten to that too. I didn't move much the rest of the day. Lunch came and went, some soft pasta and canned peas. I ate it all without tasting any of it. My thoughts returned to the garage, the workshop, the wooden airplane I never finished for Toby, the drawer in the office labeled Wills and Things, the shelf of photo albums we never digitized, all the things they didn't ask about, all the parts of me that didn't fit into their tidy plan. At dinner, I asked Kyle for a pen. He gave me one, no questions. Back in my room, I used the back of an old crossword to write out everything I remembered about the accounts, the policy number, Elise's notes, the lawyer we used. I wrote and rewrote the address of our old bank until it looked like a hymn. Then I folded the paper and slipped it into my slipper. Before lights out, I sat in the stiff recliner by the window and looked outside. The moon had risen low like a breath held back. I didn't feel small anymore, not invisible. I would find a way back, not just to the house, to myself. The envelope came 3 days later, addressed to the facility, pale blue with no return name. I'd forgotten what anticipation felt like until I saw Kyle holding it, turning it over like it might break in his hand. He said, "Mail for you, Mr. Halpern," then hesitated. "From a firm, I think." I didn't answer him. I just reached, trembling, and took it. The paper was thick, formal. Inside, folded once and perfectly aligned, was a letter. No greeting, no signature, just a typed message in a font too neat to feel human. Per request, the transaction has been executed. Property on 18 Ridgeway Drive has been transferred. New ownership effective immediately. Please note, all future correspondence will be directed to the acting representative, Mrs. Marcy Halperin. No mention of me, not as a party, not even as a witness. I read it again. Not a single line acknowledged that I'd lived there for 43 years, that Elise had died in that house, that I'd planted the cherry tree out back when Toby was born. The property, not our home. The coldness of it knocked the breath from my lungs. "Everything okay?" Kyle asked, hovering near the door, clipboard in hand. I nodded once, folding the letter, careful not to crumple it. "Fine, just paperwork." He left without pressing. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. The letter felt heavier than its weight. I slipped it into the back of the drawer under the crossword page, for now, so they'd gone through with it, without my name, without my consent. That explained the haste, the folder, the forced smiles, the urgency masked as concern. My son had lied to my face. Not just lied, he'd erased me. The idea of calling the firm crossed my mind, but what could I say? I had no proof, no phone, no account access. Marcy had taken everything under the banner of managing things. That was the phrase she loved. Managing things. Elise once told me there are two kinds of betrayal. The kind that surprises you, and the kind that confirms what you feared all along. I had feared this. I just hadn't expected it to come with a stamp and a watermark. I didn't eat lunch that day. I walked the hall instead, slow and deliberate. I watched the other residents, a woman humming into her soup, a man who talked to invisible people. I wondered if they'd also been neatly packaged, tucked away for convenience, if they had families who said things like, "For your safety," and "You'll be around people your own age." Back in my room, I pulled the curtain closed and opened the bottom drawer again. The crossword page was still there, slightly smudged from my slipper. I unfolded it and stared at the name I'd scrawled. Thornton and Marks, LLP Elise's lawyer. The only one we ever trusted. He'd retired years ago, but his nephew had taken over, Daniel Marks. A polite young man with kind eyes. He'd sent a holiday card the year Elise died. He had known her voice, her handwriting. I needed to reach him. But how? That night I asked Kyle if there was a community board. For notices, I said. Things residents might need. He nodded. By the front entrance. You want to post something? Yes, I need a local courier. He tilted his head. A delivery? Just an envelope. He blinked, uncertain, but finally said, Sure, I'll ask the receptionist. I spent the next hour carefully writing out a note on the back of the policy pamphlet, folded it, tucked it into another envelope with the crossword page. No signature. Just, please deliver by hand. Confidential. The next morning I left it at the front desk and waited. It was a long shot, maybe foolish, but it was mine, my effort, my reach beyond this place. And if Daniel Marks remembered me, remembered Elise, maybe this wasn't over yet. I waited 4 days before anything happened. 4 days of bad coffee, slow walks past the community board, and watching that damn curtain breathe with the wind through the window vent. I didn't ask Kyle again. Didn't want to spook the process. A plan, no matter how small, demands silence until it bears fruit. On the 5th morning, I returned from a pointless blood pressure check and found an envelope tucked into the spine of my Bible. I hadn't touched the book in months, but I kept it on the bedside table out of habit. Like Elise's framed picture, the one of her reading on the back porch with the wind in her hair, her fingers curled around a mug she never drank from because the coffee always got cold too fast. I sat down carefully and opened the envelope. Mr. Halperin, your message reached me. Yes, I remember Elise, and you. My uncle spoke well of both of you. I reviewed the recent property filings. Your name does not appear on the transfer, though the original deed listed you as co-owner. Please do not be alarmed yet. There may be legal grounds for reversal depending on how consent was obtained. I will need to meet with you to discuss next steps. It was signed simply. Daniel M. No, firm stamp. No contact number. But it didn't matter. The message was enough. I sat holding the note like it might dissolve. I read it 5 times. My name, Elise's. The words reversal and co-owner pulsed in my chest. My heart pounded, not with fear, but something close to hope. Not quite joy. Something sharper, older. It had begun. That evening I asked Kyle if I could sit outside after dinner. He smiled like he was indulging a child and wheeled me to the patio, where the wind smelled faintly of pine mulch and car exhaust. I waited with the letter tucked in my coat. 20 minutes later, a man in a navy overcoat approached the bench beside me. He didn't sit, just looked down and said, Mr. Halperin. I nodded. Daniel. He was taller than I remembered, leaner, no beard, no glasses, only the same gray eyes, watchful and still. He handed me another envelope, this one thicker. Legal pages, neatly stapled, bound with a red paper clip. He kept his voice low. The transfer paperwork was processed under what's called medical consent. They submitted a physician's statement about your capacity. I stared at him. They said I was unfit? He nodded, gently. They didn't use that word, but the phrasing implied cognitive decline, decision-making concerns. They used it to bypass your co-ownership rights. The wind stung my ears, but I'm lucid. I'm not... I know. He didn't flinch. That's why I came. I turned the papers over in my lap. Can it be undone? Possibly. We'll need to challenge the medical evaluation first, prove you were competent at the time of transfer, and we'll need testimony. From people who've seen you regularly, I let that sit in the air between us. Then I nodded. I want to proceed. I'll file a motion this week, quietly. He rose. You'll need to be careful. If they get wind of this, they might try to silence it. I'm already silenced, I said, not bitter, just plain. He looked at me for a long second. Then we'll unmute you. As he walked away, I realized my hands were shaking, not from weakness, from adrenaline. Later that night, I slid Daniel's letter and the legal packet into the hollow behind Elise's photo frame, a childish hiding place, but mine. I lay back, heart still racing. They thought I'd surrender quietly, but they forgot. I built that house, and I still know how to hold a hammer. The first swing came the next morning, though no tools were involved. I told Kyle I wanted a cognitive test, formal, documented. He raised an eyebrow. You're sharp as a tack, Mr. Halperin. Everyone knows that. Let's make it official, I said. Put it on record. He hesitated, but eventually scribbled something on his clipboard and said he'd ask the nurse practitioner. It took 2 days. On Thursday, a woman named June came in with a briefcase and a set of laminated cards. I could tell by her calm, sing-song tone that she expected to coddle me. She didn't know I'd been preparing. She asked me to count backward by sevens. I gave her 50 names from memory, postmasters, clerks, military superiors, then described in vivid detail the route Elise and I took down the Pacific Coast Highway in '89. I corrected her on the name of the current Secretary of State and recited, stopping by woods on a snowy evening without missing a line. She didn't speak much after that, just marked her form and nodded once. You're not impaired, she said quietly. I asked for a copy of her report. That afternoon I wrote Daniel a new letter, no return address, just test complete, memory intact. Let's proceed. I tucked it into a manila envelope and handed it to Kyle. Can you drop this with the courier desk? I asked. He didn't question me this time. The fight had begun, and then I felt it in my bones, but not the way you feel arthritis or age. It was something else. Old steel returning, not rage. Focus. Still something gnawed at the edge of my thoughts. Toby. He hadn't called in months, but I remembered him sitting cross-legged on our living room floor, building tiny forts from cereal boxes. He was only 8 when Elise got sick, and by the time she died, he'd stopped making eye contact. He just stayed locked inside his room, headphones clamped to his ears, lost in blinking screens and other worlds. I tried, but I couldn't reach him. Marcy did. She offered structure, boundaries, chores, therapy. I didn't argue. Elise was gone, and I was tired. I gave her space to mother him. It seemed easier than being the father he resented. But now I wondered, did she feed him her version of the story? That I was stubborn, unsafe, diminished? Did she tell him that placing me here was love? I needed to hear his voice, not to plead, just to see what remained. That evening, I asked Kyle again, can I borrow the community phone? He glanced over at the front desk. They'll want a staff member present. I'm not calling Vegas, just my grandson. After a long pause, he sighed. 10 minutes. I'll stand just outside. I dialed the number from memory. 2 rings. Hello? Toby, it's me. A pause. Grandpa? I wanted to check on you. It's been a while. Another pause. Mom said you were resting. I am, but not forever. Silence, then. She said you gave them the house. No, Toby, I didn't. The line crackled. She said you forgot things, that you couldn't manage it anymore. That's what she told you? Yeah. Well, I said softly, there's more to the story. I heard a shaky breath on the other end. Then, you sound fine. I am fine. I miss you. I miss you too, he whispered. Do you want me to visit? I'd like that very much. I hung up before Kyle could ask questions. My fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from the knowledge that something had shifted. Marcy had spun a tale, but the thread had begun to unravel. The next morning I found a small folded paper under my tray at breakfast. Kyle didn't make eye contact as he set down the eggs. He didn't need to. I waited until he walked away before opening it. Thursday, 2:15 p.m. Probate filing confirmed. I'll bring the papers. DM probate. The word carried weight. It meant we were moving forward, that the transfer wasn't just shady but challengeable, that someone, somewhere, had believed a lie bold enough to become law. But now, we were putting truth on record. At 2:10 sharp, Kyle wheeled me into the visitor room. Neutral walls, cheap chairs. A fake plant in the corner leaned like it had given up. I adjusted my collar, smoothed the front of my sweater. I hadn't looked this alive in months. Daniel arrived right on time, briefcase in hand, coat still dusted with salt from the sidewalk. He nodded once. You look good. Flattery won't win this, I said, but I smiled. He laid out the papers on the table. We're submitting a motion to reverse the deed transfer. Medical authority was abused, and your capacity test, solid gold. I nodded. And Marcy? She'll receive notice after we file. She'll have a chance to respond. She won't respond, I said. She'll retaliate. Daniel leaned back. Then we stay ready. Keep records, stick to facts, no emotion. Too late, I muttered. He handed me a pen. Initial here, signature there. I did. My name looked strange, older, more brittle, but still mine. As he packed up, I asked, Will she know you're representing me? He paused. Eventually. Good, I said. I want her to know. Back in my room, I stood at the window watching the shadows shift under the trees. I thought of Elise again. How she'd sit on the porch with a book in her lap, but never turn the page, just watching the wind through the short grass like it was whispering secrets. That evening, Marcy called. Kyle brought the receiver into my room and plugged it in, awkwardly polite. She said, It's urgent. I took the call. Marcy. Well, she said, sweet as vinegar. Look who found his voice. I never lost it. She exhaled sharply. Why are you stirring things up? It's done. The house is under my name now. There's no going back. I never gave permission. You were unwell. We had every right to. I passed the test. I've filed a motion. You'll be notified. She went quiet. Then, You're going to throw your own family to the wolves over some paperwork? No, I'm protecting what Elise and I built. That house is a burden. We were helping you. No, you were helping yourself, she hissed. Toby doesn't need to be caught in the middle of this. You dragged him there when you lied to him. I'm his mother. I was his grandfather first. The silence on the line stretched like a fault line, then low and cold. You'll regret this. I already do, I said, but not for the reasons you think. I hung up before she could say more. My hands didn't shake this time. Kyle entered a moment later, quietly unplugging the phone. Everything okay? I met his eyes. I think we just declared war. He didn't laugh, just nodded. Then we'll need reinforcements. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from worry, but readiness. My thoughts were clear, the clearest they'd been in months. My body was tired, yes. But my mind had snapped into form like an old compass finding true north. Marcy had underestimated me. So had my son. So had everyone, really. But now the papers were filed, the tests were passed, the past was intact. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one being watched. I was the one drawing the line. It was the third Monday of the month when they showed up. My son wore his office slacks, the ones that always looked too tight at the waist. His tie was crooked, like he'd yanked it on in anger. Marcy stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes scanning the hallway like she was already assessing for weaknesses. Neither of them smiled. They didn't have to. They weren't here for charm. Kyle knocked once and stepped aside. "We need to talk," my son said. No greeting, no hesitation. I motioned to the stiff armchair by the window. "Be my guest." He sat. Marcy didn't. I studied them both. My son had gained weight around the neck, and his knuckles were red. Stress, maybe. Marcy had that same tight expression she used when Elise corrected her grammar at the dinner table. "This wasn't a visit. This was a siege. We received the papers," he said, "from your lawyer." "Daniel Marks," I clarified. "Elise's family counsel. He remembers everything. You didn't have to escalate this." "I didn't escalate," I said calmly. I responded. Marcy cut in. "Dad, you don't understand what you're doing. This will cause damage to everyone." "I'm aware. We didn't do this to hurt you. We did it to protect you." My laugh came without bitterness. "You sold my house, declared me incompetent, moved me into a facility against my will, and now you want me to believe it was mercy?" Her mouth twitched. "You weren't well." "I passed the cognitive test." "That test is irrelevant now," she snapped. "This has become a legal spectacle." My son finally looked up. "Dad, we're asking you to drop it. Let's avoid court." "You mean avoid discovery, avoid the judge reading aloud how you forged consent?" Marcy stepped closer, voice dropping. "We took care of you when no one else would." "No," I said, slow and even. "You took control. There's a difference." My son's hands clenched. "What do you want from us?" I looked at him carefully, the same boy who cried in my arms when he scraped his knee on the porch steps, who once whispered, "I want to be like you when I grow up." I answered without raising my voice. "I want acknowledgement of what you did, of what you took, of who I still am." "That's not going to happen," Marcy said flatly. "Then we proceed." She scoffed. "You think some judge will side with an 80-year-old man in a nursing home over a family trying to keep him safe?" "I don't need a judge to see me," I said. "I just need the record to show I fought." They stared at me, realizing finally that they hadn't broken me, that whatever version of me they'd sold, the forgetful, docile old man, was a fiction now crumbling. Marcy moved to the door. "You'll regret this when the money's gone, when no one visits." I looked her in the eye. "I regret only trusting you." My son lingered a moment longer. He looked tired, or guilty, maybe both. "It didn't have to be like this," he said quietly. I nodded once. "But it is." When they left, I didn't move. I sat in silence until the overhead light flickered, until the hallway noise faded into evening shuffle. There was no peace in confrontation, no satisfaction, but there was clarity. I wasn't lost anymore. I wasn't theirs to define. And when they walked out that door, I realized the grief wasn't from losing my house. It was from losing the version of them I thought still loved me. The paperwork came through 2 weeks later. A reversal motion scheduled for review. Daniel sent a short, handwritten note with it. "Probate judge flagged inconsistencies. You were right to speak up." I read it 3 times, then tucked it beneath Elise's photo. Something cracked open in my chest. Not quite joy, not yet, but a release of pressure I'd carried like a second spine. That afternoon, I packed. It wasn't dramatic, no boxes, no goodbyes. Just the slow folding of what little I had. 2 sweaters, Elise's shawl, the framed picture, and the packet of legal papers. Kyle wheeled me to the front desk and nodded toward the exit. "You sure?" he asked. "Yes." He didn't ask where I was going. That was the mercy of a man who'd watched me fight in silence for months. Outside, the car Daniel had arranged waited with the engine running. The driver, a woman with a baseball cap and kind eyes, loaded my things into the trunk without comment. When I settled in the back seat, she glanced at me in the mirror. "You need music?" "No," I said. Just the window cracked. We drove in silence, through old neighborhoods where shutters sagged and playgrounds rusted, past the corner store Elise used to visit every Thursday, where she'd return with licorice for me and something new for Toby, puzzle books, comics, once a harmonica he never learned to play. I didn't cry. There was no swelling orchestration inside me, just presence. When we pulled into the drive, I barely recognized it. The house sat in shadow. The porch swing was gone, replaced by a cold, modern bench, Marcy's touch, no doubt. But the bones were still there, the way the windows held morning light, the oak that stood like a sentinel by the walk. She hadn't gutted that. The driver helped me with my things, but I didn't go inside. I was not here to reclaim the house physically. Not yet. We continued another 5 miles out past the main road into a quiet row of brick bungalows surrounded by tidy shrubs and aging maples. Daniel had found a rental for me, a 1-bedroom, furnished, paid for the year. Discreet, private, clean. I stepped inside and paused. It smelled like lemon oil and wool. The walls were bare, but the furniture was solid. The kitchen held a small round table and a row of mugs. No photos, no clutter, just potential. The driver placed my bag on the bed and handed me the keys. You got groceries coming in tomorrow? Cable's on. That lamp in the corner has the best light. Thank you, I said, my voice strange in the open space. When she left, I stood in the middle of the room. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt honest. I walked to the table, unpacked Elise's photo, and set it by the window. Her eyes met mine from that summer we spent in Oregon. Before the diagnosis, before the unraveling, she looked as if she'd been waiting for me. I placed the legal folder in the drawer and ran my hand along the grain of the wooden chair. No one had followed me here. No one had permission to enter. There were no monitors, no intercoms, no pills scheduled with fluorescent lights, just me, and air I didn't have to ask for. I made tea that night, weak but hot. I sat by the window with the cup warming my hands and watched dusk fall without needing to explain myself to anyone. The silence in the new apartment wasn't loneliness. It was mine. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't ask for explanation, the kind that feels earned. That's what I found in those first days alone. Not isolation, but stillness. A rhythm slower than I remembered, but steady, like my heartbeat when I used to measure flour for Elise's cornbread recipe. I began rising before dawn, not out of habit, but curiosity. What did the world sound like before anyone needed something from me? The radiator hissed softly in the morning. Birds warbled in the maples beyond the window. No one knocked. No one hovered. I brewed my own coffee, strong, black, burnt at the edges, and sat at the small round table by the window. The photo of Elise stood beside me, watching like she always had when I got stubborn with crossword clues. I found myself talking to her out loud, small things, not confessions, just presence. You'd hate this rug, I said one morning, and smiled at how clearly I could hear her voice teasing me back. The physical aches didn't vanish. My hips still protested when I bent to tie my shoes. My hands were stiff, especially on cold mornings. But something else had lifted, a weight that had lived behind my ribs for months, maybe years, had gone quiet. I hadn't realized how much I'd let them write the story of my decline. One afternoon I walked slowly, cane in hand, to the corner bakery. They sold honey wheat loaves wrapped in brown paper. I brought one home, sliced it thick, and ate it with butter that melted too fast. I almost wept from the taste of it. Freedom doesn't come like a trumpet. It comes like that, warm bread and soft light on your hands. That evening, I opened a box Daniel had dropped off the day before. Court correspondence, witness statements, medical documentation. Among them, a note written in thick blue pen. I saw Mr. Halperin every day. He never showed confusion. He remembered names, dates, even old jokes. He wasn't impaired. He was grieving. Kyle R.I. hadn't asked him to do that. He'd done it on his own, and I felt something then that startled me. Pride. Not in what I'd survived, but in what I'd inspired. Quiet resistance leaves ripples. Later that week, I received a postcard. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. The house feels hollow without you. I'm not picking sides. Just wanted you to know. I'm thinking about college near you. T. Toby. My grandson. 17 and still deciding who he believes, but the fact that he'd written, that he'd searched for my address or asked someone to find it, that meant something was breaking open, slowly, quietly, but opening. That night I opened the windows despite the chill and let the night air roll over me like water. I lit one of Elise's old candles, the kind she used to keep in the linen closet for emergencies, but never actually lit. It smelled faintly of lavender and something older. Dust, maybe. Time. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. There were no beeping monitors, no hallway chatter, no alarms for pills. Just air. Just me. And I smiled. Not because anything had been won, not yet, but because I had arrived. For the first time in years, I felt whole, not repaired, not improved, just entirely myself. Toby arrived on a Sunday, unannounced. I heard the knock at 10 minutes past 2, 3 short taps, then silence. I hadn't been expecting anyone. My first thought was Daniel, perhaps with court news, but when I opened the door, there he stood, backpack slung over one shoulder, a baseball cap twisted in his hands like a napkin at a bad diner. "Hey," he said. He was taller now. Narrow face, new freckles. The last time I saw him, he was still shorter than me. Now we met eye to eye. I stepped aside without a word, and he walked in looking everywhere but at me. He stared at the bookshelf, the mug in the sink, Elise's photo. "You kept her picture," he said. "Always," I replied. He nodded once and sat at the table, his knees too long for the chair now. I made tea. Not because I knew what else to do, but because muscle memory took over. When I brought it to the table, he didn't drink. He just wrapped his hands around the cup. "She's mad I came," he said finally. "Your mother?" He nodded. "Said you were manipulating things, that you twisted everything in court. Did you believe her?" "I believed something," he said carefully. "But then I read the papers." "What papers?" "The court packet. I saw the medical notes, your test scores, and I remembered, when I called you, you didn't sound lost." I said nothing. I let him speak. "She told me you forgot birthdays, that you stopped recognizing her voice." "I forgot nothing," I said. I chose silence for a while, but that's different. He looked up then, straight into me. "She said you were trying to ruin us." I met his gaze. I was trying to recover myself. He blinked rapidly like he was fighting something. I didn't know who to believe. I wanted to, but "I don't need you to pick sides, Toby. I just needed you to see me." He nodded again, slower. "I do now." We sat like that, in quiet, for longer than I expected. I poured more tea. This time he drank. He asked about Elise, not just the illness, but before. Our trips, her stories, her piano playing, how she used to stop mid-song and hum instead. He told me he remembered the way she folded napkins into tiny birds, that she'd taught him how to draw trees by starting with the roots. She would have hated all this, he said. She would have corrected everyone's grammar in the courtroom, I replied, and we both laughed. A real one, round and soft like bread rising. "I want to know you better," he said suddenly. "Not just Grandpa in the recliner. I want the whole you." "There's not much to dig through." He shook his head. "That's where you're wrong." He pulled a notepad from his backpack. On the first page was a list. Questions for Grandpa. Numbered, underlined. I scanned the first few. "What scared you most as a child? How did you meet Grandma? When did you first feel like a man? What's something you wish you'd done differently?" I touched the paper with my fingertips. "You really want to know all that?" "I think I need to," he said. We spent the rest of the afternoon going down the list. We didn't finish. We barely scratched the surface, but by the time he left, his eyes had softened, his spine straighter. Mine too, maybe. At the door, he paused. "You're not alone anymore, okay?" "I know," I whispered. And I did. The letter arrived 2 days later, a thick envelope, embossed return address, Daniel's firm. I opened it with a butter knife, carefully. Inside, the words were clinical, but the meaning hit like thunder. Plaintiff's claim of mental incompetence at time of transfer has been deemed invalid. Property ownership remains under legal dispute pending further mediation. They weren't backing down. Marcy had filed a counterclaim. I should have expected it. Pride like hers doesn't dissolve in silence. It hardens, sharpens, goes hunting. I called Daniel that afternoon. He answered on the second ring. She wants blood, I said. She wants control, he corrected. This is her last move. Delay, intimidate, drain your resolve. Will it work? Not if you're still willing to fight. I am. He exhaled. Then we proceed. I'll draft a rebuttal and request expedited mediation. Let her talk to the judge, I said. Let her try to explain herself out loud. That night I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from anger. Not the hot kind, the slow, ancient kind that simmers until it becomes clarity. She hadn't just taken the house. She had tried to erase me from it, my memories, my place. My right to say this is mine too. It wasn't about walls and floorboards. It was about meaning, about legacy. About the way Elise's perfume clung to the upstairs curtains no matter how many times we washed them. About the nick in the kitchen tile where Toby dropped his first plate. About the oil-stained garage floor where I taught my son to change brake pads. She wanted it scrubbed clean, of me. But I'd left fingerprints too deep for her to polish away. The next morning I received a call from Kyle. His voice was softer than usual. I heard from Toby, he said. He mentioned the pushback. It's official. He asked if you needed anything, thought maybe a character statement from me could help. You'd do that? You're the reason I still work there, he said. Watching you push back, it reminded me why I got into this work. I didn't know what to say. I just swallowed the thickness in my throat and whispered, "Thank you." Later that day, Daniel emailed a summary of the counterclaim. Marcy had cited undue emotional instability and coercive outside influence, implying that I had been manipulated by opportunistic legal counsel. The irony of her accusing someone else of manipulation nearly made me laugh. But it was the last paragraph that caught me off guard. She referenced Toby, stating she was concerned for his emotional well-being due to the undue pressure and conflict arising from his grandfather's litigious decisions. She was using him now, not just to lie to, but as leverage. I set the letter down, steadying my breath. She wasn't fighting fair anymore. That evening, Toby called. She's furious, he said, voice low. Says I'm being brainwashed, that I don't understand what she sacrificed. She's afraid, I said. Afraid of what happens when truth has an audience. He was quiet a long time. Then, she told me not to call anymore. Will you? Yes, he said, even if I have to hide it. Don't hide, just live honest. That's how we win. He sighed. I'm with you, no matter what. I hung up and sat by the window watching the wind tilt the leaves outside. I felt the pull of something bigger than revenge. This was reclamation. Not just of property, but of voice, of place, of identity. She'd made her move. Now I would make mine. She tried to write me out of my own life, but I still held the pen. The mediation was set for Friday morning. Neutral ground, Daniel said, a quiet conference room in a downtown office building, all glass and artificial calm. I wore my best jacket, the navy one Elise had picked for our anniversary dinner the year before her diagnosis. I couldn't button it like I used to, but I didn't need to. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to stand. Daniel met me outside. He gave a brief nod. She's already inside, with counsel. Of course she is. Just speak your truth, he said. I'm not here to perform, I said quietly. I'm here to end this. The room was colder than it should have been. A long table, water pitchers, polite silence. Marcy sat opposite, hair neat, expression unreadable. Her lawyer was younger than I expected, eager eyes, expensive pen. I didn't look at her when I sat. I looked at the mediator. Middle-aged woman, steady voice, no nonsense. She outlined the structure. 30 minutes for each side, followed by rebuttals and questions. Marcy's attorney went first, charts.dates, legal jargon, terms like protective intervention and intent to provide stable care. I didn't flinch. Then it was Daniel's turn. Calm, methodical. He handed over test results, affidavits. Read Kyle's statement aloud. Mr. Halpern demonstrated full orientation, recall, emotional regulation, and insight throughout my care of him. There was no cause to suspect cognitive deterioration. The mediator nodded. Mr. Halpern, do you wish to speak? I stood slowly. No cane, no notes. My name is Joseph Halpern, I began. I lived in that house for 43 years. I planted the apple tree in the backyard. I poured the foundation for the shed. I built the porch with my own hands. Elise and I raised our son there. We buried our dog beneath the swing. I paused. No one interrupted. I was grieving when they took me out of that house. Not failing, not confused, grieving. That grief was mistaken or used as weakness, and because of that, they stole my name off a deed I co-signed. Marcy shifted in her seat. I am not senile, I am not unstable, and I am not disposable. I turned toward her then, for the first time. I don't want your apology. I want my dignity restored. She opened her mouth, but her lawyer touched her arm. The mediator thanked me and called for a recess. In the hallway, Daniel handed me a paper cup of water. You were brilliant. I wasn't trying to be, I said. I know. That's why it worked. 10 minutes later, we were called back in. The mediator looked over her notes. Her voice was calm but firm. Given the medical evaluations and legal inconsistencies in the original transfer, I am recommending full property rights be returned to Mr. Halperin. If Ms. Marks would like to pursue reimbursement for maintenance or expenses during her time managing the property, she may file separately. Marcy's lips parted, but she didn't speak. I signed nothing, not yet, but it was done. The reversal had weight now, authority. On the way out, she stopped me. You'll ruin everything for him, she said. For Toby. I looked at her like I had never seen her before, because, in truth, I hadn't. You already did, I said. I'm just undoing it. She blinked, lips tight. No retort, no apology. Daniel touched my elbow. Let's go. As we stepped into the light outside, I breathed deeper than I had in months. She couldn't reach me now, not legally, not emotionally. I had drawn the boundary and stepped over it into something clean. The apartment grew warmer after that, not in temperature, but in texture. I found myself rearranging the kitchen drawers, hanging up new curtains, folding blankets, the way Elise used to, into perfect thirds, not halves. There was purpose in the small things now, not just ritual, and I started walking more. Down the block, around the pond, sometimes through the used bookstore with no intention of buying. The clerk never asked questions, just smiled when I lingered in the poetry aisle. She reminded me of Elise in the way her hair always seemed slightly windblown, even indoors. Her name was Nora. I didn't learn that until the fourth visit. She wore reading glasses on a chain and spoke with a soft rasp, as if life had sanded her voice down but not out. You've got good taste, she said once, holding up a Mary Oliver collection I had tucked under my arm. Elise loved her. Your wife? Yes. Gone 3 years now. She nodded, and there was no awkwardness, just space. Next time, she brought out a book before I even reached the shelf. This one reminded me of your eyes, she said, and left it there without explanation. It was Basho. I began to linger longer. Sometimes we sat on the bench just outside the shop drinking coffee from waxy cups. She asked questions slowly, the kind that didn't pry but invited. What made you laugh as a child? What's something you've never told anyone? And I answered. Honestly, not because I had something to prove, but because she listened like no one else was coming. Like the moment was enough, we never touched. Not yet. But one afternoon, she reached over and brushed a crumb from my sleeve, and my body didn't flinch. That alone felt monumental. I told Toby about her over lunch one Saturday. He'd come with a grocery bag full of things I didn't ask for but appreciated. Dates, walnuts, a new jar of mustard. "She sounds cool," he said, chewing. "She is. Are you gonna, date her?" "We're not 15, I said. He grinned. "You could still hold hands." I chuckled. "Maybe." He took a sip of soda. "Mom's not happy. She's saying you poisoned me against her." "You know that's not true." "I do," he said. "I just hate that everything's a battlefield now." "You don't have to live in a battlefield, Toby. You get to choose peace, even if she doesn't." He looked out the window. "It's weird, you know. How things feel more honest over here, like I can breathe." "Then keep coming back," I said. "Whenever you need air." When he left, he hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the shoulder pat kind, but the kind where you stay until both heartbeats settle. That night, I lit another candle. One Nora had given me, smelling faintly of bergamot and pine. The apartment glowed gently in the quiet, and I thought about how far I'd come, not in distance, but in self. Not long ago, I had no voice, no space, no name that carried weight. Now I had all three, and maybe, just maybe, I had something more. Not just a room, not just a victory, but the start of something, of someone, new. The house came back to me in April. Daniel called on a Friday morning with the final notice. Transfer of ownership complete, reversal filed, deed re-recorded. No more disputes, no more threats. "It's yours," he said, "in name, in law, in full." I didn't say anything at first, just held the receiver to my ear and let the silence settle between us like dust after a storm. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes," I said finally. "I think so." It took me a few days to go back. I wasn't rushing. The idea of stepping into those rooms again, rooms that had been emptied, twisted, misused, felt heavier than expected. Nora offered to drive me. She didn't ask questions, just brought a thermos of tea and a blanket for my lap, like we were going on a picnic. When we pulled into the driveway, I asked her to wait. "I need to do this part alone," I said. She nodded and handed me the keys. "Take your time." The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just grown in ways it couldn't contain anymore. Inside, the air was stale, but not sour. The furniture Marcy had picked was gone. The walls were bare. It was hollow, but not hostile, just waiting. I walked through each room slowly, my fingers trailing the ridges of the hallway, the kitchen tile, the curve of the stair banister I had varnished myself one summer. Elise's piano was gone. I expected that. But the marks on the floor where its legs had stood were still there, silent indentations, as if it had waited too long and left reluctantly. I made my way upstairs. The bedroom looked unfamiliar. Blank walls, stripped bed, an echo to each step. But the closet still smelled like cedar, and behind the loose floorboard I found the little box I had forgotten I'd hidden. Inside, 2 letters from Elise, 1 yellowed movie stub, a pressed daisy from our Oregon trip, and the gold locket I thought had vanished. I sat on the floor and opened the locket. Her face smiled back at me, unfaded. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because the sadness had settled into something gentler. Acceptance, maybe. Back downstairs, I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch. The garden was overgrown, but the apple tree still stood, taller now. Its branches sagged slightly, heavy with early buds. I ran my hand over the porch railing, worn smooth in places where hands had always rested. That afternoon, with Nora's help, I posted a small sign in the front window. "Coming soon. A new chapter." It wasn't clever, but it was true. We hired a contractor the next week. Nothing drastic, just a fresh coat of paint, new fixtures, repairs on the floor. I walked him through every corner, every nook that held memory. "Keep the built-in shelves," I said. "Elise designed those." He nodded. "You got it." And slowly, the house softened. It didn't become what it had been. It couldn't, but it became something else. Mine. In the evenings, I'd bring Nora by. We'd sit on lawn chairs and sip ginger tea while the workers cleaned up for the day. Sometimes Toby came too, asking about architecture and telling me about his art classes. We spoke of future Thanksgivings, maybe a small garden next spring, maybe even music again. I wasn't trying to reclaim the past anymore. I was preparing for a life forward, not just a house, a place where I was wanted. The morning I moved back in, the light came through the kitchen window exactly the way it used to, pale gold, filtered by the apple tree's leaves, painting dappled shapes across the floor. I stood for a long while just watching it, letting it touch my face like a benediction. It wasn't about reclaiming territory anymore. It was about returning to the self I'd misplaced. The house had shifted, yes, but so had I. I moved slowly through each room, placing things with care. Elise's photo went on the mantel again, centered, calm. Toby's sketch of the old porch sat beside it, rough lines and all. The bookshelf was fuller now, poetry and old engineering manuals side by side. Nora had left me a note tucked into the second shelf. Home is the one place that forgives you for leaving. I sat on the couch and ran my fingers along the armrest. The fabric was new, but the shape was the same. I remembered Elise curling into it with a book, her feet tucked under her like a cat. I remembered Sunday mornings, her hair still damp from the shower, the house thick with the smell of cinnamon and soap. I remembered, and it didn't break me. Later that week, Toby came with a bag of groceries and a new plant. Some stubborn green thing, he said, would thrive in indirect light. It's called a snake plant, he said, setting it in the window. You can forget to water it and it still sticks around, like you. I smiled. That's a compliment? He grinned. The highest kind. We ate sandwiches and watched the world pass outside. He asked questions still, different ones now, not about the past, but about what was next. You ever think of getting a dog again? Not yet, I said. Maybe. If the house asks for one. He nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Nora visited the next evening, no candles, no occasion. Just a gentle knock and her voice calling, I brought something sweet. We sat on the porch with slices of lemon cake on mismatched plates. She looked around at the garden, now partially cleared. You've done wonders, she said. So has time. She leaned into the chair, one leg folded beneath her. You seem peaceful. I am. You think it's over? No, I said. I think it's just beginning. She reached over and took my hand, just held it. No performance, no promises, just warmth. We sat like that until the sun dipped behind the trees, the cicadas rising in chorus. That night, I stood at the kitchen sink and stared out at the yard. The wind moved through the branches like fingers through hair. I thought about legacy, not in money or land, but in how we remember each other, in what we leave behind, in gestures, in choices, in the way we teach someone to stand when they've been pushed too far. Toby would remember this, not just the courtroom, not just the fall, but the rise, the stillness, the kitchen light. He'd remember the quiet of a house that once betrayed me and now held me, and I, too, would remember that it was never too late to return, to begin again, to belong to oneself fully. I didn't forgive them, but I let them go, and I smiled, because finally I could.